Welcome again to the Conservative Historian. What I wanted to discuss today was a false comparison that is currently being made to the United States response to the coronavirus pandemic and the United States response in the past to World War II. Now, several media outlets that include Axios, Forbes magazine, and even MSNBC have made this comparison. This comparison is false for the following reasons. Let's start with World War II and the demographics. In any war, and certainly was the case in World War II, it disproportionately affects the young and disproportionately affects males. In World War II, the United States experienced over 400,000 combat fatalities, most of them young, most of them male. Contrast that with the coronavirus pandemic. According to the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, it disproportionately affects the elderly. The coronavirus pandemic, or as also is known as COVID-19, adversely affects those age populations above 65. So in World War II, it affected the young. In the case of coronavirus, it's been affecting the old. Next, let's talk about the economy and the economic impact of these two crises. In the case of World War II, the necessity for ramping up production meant that it essentially ended the Great Depression. Now, there is a wrong belief that the New Deal ended the Great Depression. That is incorrect. It was that ramp up of production and the need to employ millions of previously unemployed people within the armed services. By the end of the war, by 1945, there was over 8 million service members and all of the factories. The United States produced tens of thousands of planes, vehicles, tanks, and ships in order to win the war, in order to achieve victory. This literally lifted the nation out of that Great Depression and put people to work. Now, let's contrast that with the coronavirus pandemic and our response to that. We are not saying that quarantining, social distancing, or the shutting down of businesses is bad policy. It sounds like it is the right policy. But the long-term effect of that is going to be severe unemployment. Business will ramp up, but it will not ramp up as fast as it was shut down. So in the case of World War II, more people were put to work. In the case of the coronavirus pandemic, people were put out of work. Now let's talk about preparation. The Trump administration has been castigated for a lack of preparation. How did they not see this coming? Well, the coronavirus pandemic was definitely something that was unseen before in the history of the United States. And we first learned about it in January of 2020. But even as late as March 4th, there were only 158 cases within the United States. As of this recording, which is March 26th, there are over 60,000 cases. So in a little over 3 weeks, the spike has been enormous. And again, it was very difficult to say, well, we should have planned for that. Now let's again contrast that with World War II and the preparations. All through 1941, the Roosevelt administration and the Japanese Empire had been saber-rattling. And our possession of the Philippines at that point sat astride the primary Japanese pipeline down to the oil reserves that they needed to fuel their massive war machine that were down in the Dutch Southeast Indies. So the Philippines were right along that supply line. So the fact that on December 7th, the Japanese committed a surprise attack, a sneak attack, on our base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, the fact that this was a total surprise in and of itself is a bit of a surprise. There should have been better preparation for that, given all of the saber rattling that had gone on between the two countries throughout 1941. So the preparations between these two crises is also not comparable. And finally, time. I had previously mentioned that the timing between January of 2020 and March of 2020 a little less than 2 months, to completely ramp up to meet this threat. So that was about 2 months of time. After Pearl Harbor, in World War II, the United States did not go on fundamental offensive operations until the following fall. In the Pacific, it was Guadalcanal, and in the case of the European theater of operations, or that full section of that hemisphere, the invasion of North Africa, called Operation Torch, did not begin until November of 1942, almost a full year after Pearl Harbor. Now, something that the Axis nations did actually helped us in our preparation time. After Pearl Harbor, the Japanese Imperial Navy did not commit another sortie against Hawaii. They didn't launch a raid against the mainland of the United States, maybe San Francisco or LA. No, instead they turned all of their energies towards the conquest of the Philippines, Indochina, Malaysia, Singapore, New Guinea, and so the Japanese actually committed resources away from our primary bases, allowing us some time to ramp up. Now there were some battles, Coral Sea and Midway, but those were largely defensive battles, reaction to Japanese moves, not offensive. That occurred almost a year later. So the ramp up times for when we had to meet the threat of the coronavirus pandemic were different from the ramp up times of which we could prepare to launch offensive operations against those Axis nations. And for those four following reasons, the demographics were different. The economics are different. The prep time was different. All of these differentiations meant that it is a false comparison to compare the crises of the coronavirus pandemic against that crisis that was perpetuated on December 7th, 19 for World War II. Thank you.